everyone, this is Leslie with the Plaid Poodle. Thanks for joining me today. Today's project, we're making this cute little card, and we're going to use a resist technique to create this background paper. We're going to use some simple things that you probably have in your own home. We're going to use wax paper and an iron. So to start the card, we're going to take a piece of wax paper, and I've cut this wax paper down to fit inside my embossing folder, and I am using the Country Floral 3D embossing folder by Stampin' Up. And I would suggest for this project that you choose an embossing folder that is pretty busy, has a lot of pattern in it, and you'll have better results that way. So I'm taking a piece of waxed paper that I have cut down to fit inside the embossing folder, and I'm going to just crunch it up because I want to create some creases. And the more creases you have, the more design you're going to have at the end. So if you see a spot that needs more, just crunch it up. And then unfold the wax paper, spread it flat, and insert it into your embossing folder. We're going to run this embossing folder through the Big Shot or any die cutting machine you have. So use the recipe for the sandwich that your die cutting machine would require for a embossing folder. For the 3D embossing folder by Stampin' Up, I'm using the base plate and the just a top plate, cover plate. And it's feeling a little loose to me, so I want to make sure I get a really deep impression. So I'm going to just slip a piece of cardstock onto the plate, just to add a little bit more tension. I don't want to break my machine, but I want to have a good impression. Okay. Once you've embossed your waxed paper, you can set your embossing folder aside. We're done with that. We're going to take the piece of wax paper that we've embossed, and we're going to slip it in between two pieces of Whisper White cardstock. And I've also cut this to fit the paper, so it's about 4 by 6, 4 1/4 by 6. And then we're going to slip it inside a piece of copy paper or scrap paper that has been folded in half. And I'm going to use my iron, so I'm going to put this heat resistant mat down for a sec. And I've put my iron on dry and high heat, and it just takes a second. Turn my iron off. And we'll keep this up here for a while because we're going to do some sponging. We're done with the scrap paper. And when you want to flip these over, you're not going to be able to see anything on this Whisper White cardstock, but it is there, believe me. And I'm going to show you. It's kind of magical. I'm going to take some Poppy Parade ink and a Stampin' Dauber, And I'm just going to sponge ink on here. And you can use any kind of sponge or dauber. I'm just using one I just grabbed out of my drawer. And I'm just gently rubbing the ink onto this paper, and where the wax has melted onto it, it's creating a little resist. And as that dries, you'll be able to pick it up a little bit more. And then we'll just set this one aside. But it is going to be the same thing. So you get 2 pieces for the price of one. One's going to be a little different because you're using the back side of the wax paper. So the print is going to pick up slightly different than the front side, because one side has been embossed and one side has been debossed. But you can pick which pattern you like. I think they're both beautiful. If you'd like, you can take a piece of paper towel and wipe off the wax, the remaining wax, if you'd like. Now, to make our card, we're going to use one of these. I think I'm going to use this one with the big rose in the middle that showed up in the middle. And we're going to cut it down to fit the frame that we're going to create with the Stitch So Sweetly dies. We're going to use 3 dies out of this set. We are going to use the 2 largest stitch scallop frames to make our black frame. And we are going to use this label die or tag die for our sentiment. Now, to stamp our sentiment, we're going to use a piece of 3 by 2.5 inch Whisper White cardstock, and we're using a stamp from the So Sentimental stamp set. The So Sentimental stamp set coordinates well with the Stitch So Sweetly dies. They're perfectly shaped for the different sentiments. And if you buy them right now together, you save 10% if you purchase them in a bundle. Okay, I am taking the Memento Tuxedo Black ink and I'm going to stamp on my Whisper White cardstock the sentiment. And that's all the stamping we're going to do. And I am going to tape down, just for added measure, my die. And we'll cut these 2 out at the same time. I'm going to take these 2 larger frames from the Stitch So Sweetly dies, and I'm going to nest them inside, one inside the other, to create the frame. I'm also going to take a little tape just so they don't scooch around inside the Big Shot, the die cutting machine. And then in just a minute, we're going to die cut out this cute, lovely little butterfly. So for the sandwich, for my Big Shot, I need to use the thin die adapter. the base plate. And the top plate. And we're going to end up with a cute little tag for our card with the sentiment, "I can't thank you enough." And we're going to end up with the frame. Now this inside piece you could save for another project, but I'm going to just use it to cut my butterfly out from. We'll do that in just a minute. I am going to cut the embossed resist paper, the embossed paper. I am going to cut it out to fit the frame so we can just eyeball it. I want this rose right here in the middle. So I am going to cut mine right there. I'm just going to put a couple little snips right in between where this frame would fall. And then take my trimmer and trim off the extra. I did such a good job, I can't see it. There we go. Now I have these 2 extra pieces that I can set aside and use those in another project as well. Make sure everything's going to fit well. And then I'm going to take some multi-purpose liquid glue and just very gently leave a tiny stream of adhesive along the edge of this embossed card. Then I'll center the frame right over top. There we go. We're done with that. Now, I wanted to add a little interest to my card base, so I ran it through the Big Shot with the Subtle Impressions embossing folder. So let's do that real quick. This embossing folder is also a 3D embossing folder by Stampin' Up. And so we are only going to need our base plate, our embossing folder, and the top plate. And that is going to make a nice little, I don't know if the camera can pick that up, but there's just the most subtle texture on there. Hence the name, Subtle, for that embossing folder. Now while I've got the Big Shot out, let's go ahead and cut our little butterfly out for our card. And for the butterfly, I'm using dies from the Butterfly Beauty Thinlet sets. There's a collection of all sorts of butterflies, and I can either make a full sheet using this, or I can just take our scrap that we had and just place it on this scrap of paper. Or leftover paper we had from our frame, and cut that butterfly out. We can set this aside. We're done with the Big Shot or the die cutting machine. And we just want to get this butterfly out of the die. Making a little mess here. Here's my card base, our frame, and our tag. Now I'm going to take some paper snips and just cut this little area of the butterfly's wing where it was connected to that the big sheet of butterflies. And there's just a few little tiny pieces left in here that we can use our paper piercer to remove. Okay, now we can just assemble the card. To assemble the card, I used Stampin' Dimensionals to place our background, our embossed background. Just put one at each corner and one in the middle. I'm going to center that on the card front. Got a little bit of glue. Center that on the card front. And then I'm going to place the sentiment down here in the bottom corner because I didn't want to hide any of our pretty embossing. So I'm also going to use Stampin' Dimensionals for that. And I'm just going to place it down here at the corner. And then all that's left to do is to adhere our butterfly, and I'm going to use the mini dimensionals. I just need one. Place that back here on the back of the butterfly. And I'm going to put him or her right there. And then I'm going to add some rhinestones to my butterfly. I'm adding 3 of the smallest rhinestones from the Stampin' Up! Basic rhinestones. Line them up straight. And there is the card. So simple. Now I would add something in the middle. I would put a Whisper White cardstock in there to keep a note, or put an inside sentiment in. But that's your basic card, and that is the heat resist using wax paper and the sponging. Thank you for joining me, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.